Yes, earlymorningmob.com, the Golden Debate Show. Tone just actually pulled up in the parking lot, so we're parking lot pimping. So we'll start the show without him, and we'll see how golden we can get. Nature's golden magic, everybody. It's good for you. Like, comment, share, and download earlymorningmob.com. I don't know why the hit's been down so much. I know we've been having some technical difficulty and a little static and whatnot. But we're working through it, and that's what we do. We put in that work, and we keep open mindset and...
我々には柔道、空手の合気道、世界に2億の我々には柔道、空手の合気道、世界に2
Lewis, would it be ethical to choose the smartest embryo in pregnancy? This is a story that relates to the 50 to 80% of what determines IQ being inherited. QZ.com has an interesting story about this. There's the Shenzhen, China-based company called BGI that has a cognitive genomics division, which is mapping the genes of math geniuses, and researchers are going to compare those genes against the sample from the general population, with the goal being to isolate the genes that turn people into, that at least identify the people that are really, really smart. In theory, this could be used to predict the intelligence of an embryo. Now, BGI's CG unit isn't doing genetic testing of human embryos or in vitro fertilization, but other divisions of the same company do that. And if CG's research bears fruit and says, hey, we can identify the embryos that are going to be really smart, they could let parents pick the smartest embryo to give birth to. What do you think about this? Would it be ethical to do that?
This other guys, what they look like,
well,
I don't know.
That
don't make no sense to everybody.
We're talking about China here, a country where you're only allowed to have one child, so I can see how that would be very appealing to parents who only have one shot. But I don't know. I mean,
in some way, the U.S. is kind of dabbling with this technology. There's a private lab in New Jersey which allows couples to screen for embryos, for genetic diseases before implantation, according to Slate. This could happen with brain disorders, and it's only logical to think that the extension would be that you could also just pick smart embryos. Factually speaking, if you look at IQ versus probability of going to jail, the smarter you are, the less likely you are to ever be in jail. The less likely you are to ever be on welfare, and the less likely you are to have illegitimate children. So there could be a factual social argument to be made that selecting smarter embryos would be positive for society. Different question from whether there would be any negative effects, and different question from the ethics of it. I really want to hear from the audience.
I'm going to just continue to drill down on this first recommendation,
and once again, this brings
because
up,
it's different from what the administration has been saying and is saying. Your part calls for the government to say how many people have had their information collected. My bills for the calls for the government to say how many people have had their information collected. Yet last November, representatives from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence and the NSA came before the Subcommittee on Privacy, Technology, and the Law, which I chair, and testified that it would be, quote, difficult, if not impossible, for the government to say how many people have had their information collected under these authorities. Mr. Swire, did the administration communicate this concern to you? If so, why did you find it unpersuasive?
Thank you, Senator. We talked in some detail with the administration about transparency provisions. They certainly expressed concern at when there's a provider that has a very small number of customers, for instance, that we not tip off people who's being surveilled in those cases. There's a national security problem there. I think when it comes to the number of people who've been touched by the orders, they did not focus in their discussions with us on that risk and transparency. And my own sense, having talked among others, with the companies on this, is that if there's cooperative efforts to have the companies, the providers, work with the government, that we're likely to be able to come up with practices that allow estimates. You might not have exact numbers in all cases because sometimes you don't know if the same email applies to 3 people or 1 person. So with precision, you might not have exact details, but I think you can have good trend numbers and you can have a good overall sense of what's happening.
Okay, so, well, I'm out of my time, and as you can see, we're having another vote. So we will recess for 5 minutes for another vote. Before we do, I just want to, Mr. Sunstein, just reiterate this thing about the companies, their ability to disclose, because it is hurting them. And we had an analytics firm, Forrester, said the American cloud computing industry stands to lose up to $180 billion by 2016 as a result of increased distrust of their services, particularly abroad. So thank you for that being being part of your recommendation. So we will recess for 5 minutes because...
Well, I must congratulate you, Mr. Sanders, for getting the Greek presidency off such a cracky start.
Right now.
Your overnight successful negotiation and the trial on Mifid, I'm sure, will have them dancing in the streets of Athens. No matter that your country, very poorly advised by Goldman Sachs, joined a currency that it was never suited to. No matter that 30% are unemployed, that 60% of youth are unemployed, that a neo-Nazi party is on the march, that there was a terrorist attack on the German embassy. No, don't worry about all that, because the trialogue on MiFID has been a success. And in many ways, it sums up the 2 Europes. The Europe that's talked about in here by the dreamers, who want to impose a new United States of Europe with an identity and a currency, and the real world out there. And you come here, Mr. Sanders, and you tell us that you represent the sovereign will of the Greek people. Well, I'm sorry, but you're not in charge of Greece, and I suggest you rename and rebrand your party. It's called New Democracy. I suggest you call it No Democracy, because Greece is now under foreign control. You can't make any decisions. You've been bailed out and you've surrendered democracy, the thing your country invented in the first place. And you can't admit that joining the euro was a mistake, because, of course, Mr. Papandreou did that, didn't he? He even said there should be a referendum in Greece. And within 48 hours, the unholy trinity that now run this European Union had him removed and replaced by an ex-Goldman Sachs employee puppet. We are run now by big business, big banks, and in the shape of Mr. Barroso, big bureaucrats. And actually, that's what these European elections are really going to be all about. It's going to be a battle of national democracy versus EU state bureaucracy. Whatever you may say in this chamber,
let me read a lead-in. One of the changes that your report recommends concerning the telephony metadata program is that a private third party or parties hold the metadata instead of the NSA. But we've seen many recent instances where companies like Target and Neiman Marcus have been unable to protect private data. My constituents would be very concerned about privacy issues. So any one of you, but hopefully not all of you, because I want to ask one more question. What was the group's assessment of the privacy risks associated with your recommendation that the metadata be stored in private hands? And did you speak to the telephone companies to explore whether they are willing or able to hold the metadata?
We did speak to the telephone companies about that, and they obviously would rather not hold that data. Our judgment about the government holding the data is that the primary danger of the 215 telephony metadata program is not if it is used only in the way in which its use is authorized, but that it leaves sitting out there a huge amount of information, personal information about Americans that could be abused in awful ways. And the question is how to avoid that potential abuse. And one of the ways we decided it makes sense to avoid that is to take it out of the hands of government. The concern of the Fourth Amendment, the concern of our constitutional history, is that government can do far more harm if it abuses information in its possession than private entities can. And therefore, our judgment was that the government should not have possession of this information, because if it does, there's always the possibility of someone coming along down the road seeing this as a great opportunity to get political dirt on it.
Or other elected American officials?
We are not aware of any such. And one of the things we learned in our review is that there's no targeting by the NSA of people because of their political views or their religious convictions or their political party. So in terms of concretely some details, we may not have precise questions that every one of which we have off the top of the mind answers to, but politics, religion, political views, that's not what they're interested in.
Just one small thing. We're talking about in recent years. We're not talking about back in the 60s and 70s when there was a different history about intelligence agencies doing things that got exposed.
No, I mean in current years. Although I do want to clarify, Professor Sunstein, one thing you said about religious views. I assume you would agree that a commitment to jihad would not qualify as a religious view and indeed would be a political position and embrace of violence that merits very close scrutiny to prevent that violence from being carried out.
Yes, if there's a reason to
claim
believe
that there were as many as 50 meetings between the DEA and operatives from Mexican drug cartels. Now, before I continue with this, I need to tell you exactly how they got their information. Essentially, they took a look at a case out of federal court in Chicago. This is the deposition that they mainly based the report on, and the deposition is of an attorney representing a Mexican drug lord in which he claims that he was mediating between the leadership of the Sinaloa drug cartel and the DEA. Now, it is really up for interpretation whether we want to believe what an attorney for a drug cartel says, but let me read to you, Wolf, real quick, what he told in deposition. Again, this is under oath. He said, Mr. Loya Castro, this is the attorney that I'm telling you about, stated that agents told them that in exchange for information on rival drug trafficking organizations, the United States government agreed to dismiss the prosecution of the pending case against Mr. Loya Castro, not to interfere with his drug trafficking activities and those of the Sinaloa cartel, not to actively prosecute him, and listen to this, Wolf, the leadership of the Sinaloa cartel, and not to apprehend them. The agent stated that this arrangement had been approved by high-ranking officials and federal prosecutors. And Wolf, let me tell you that we have reached out to the DEA. They have no comment on this case, and there's no Mexican official that has validated this information so far.
Do we know anything else about these alleged arrangements, including if there was actually any payoffs?
The black guy
the report doesn't specifically talk about payoffs, but it talks very specifically about the fact that in exchange for information, the operative was going to essentially avoid any type of prosecution, benefiting the Mexican drug cartel known as the Sinaloa cartel and providing information.
This other guy, what they look like, I don't know. Everybody.
Next show's actually be with your waiting golden. Like, comment down.
1, 2, 1, 2, check 1, 2. I make the mic pump, my mic makes the point jump. Poison beats make hip hop a stump. The beat kinda wild. To give us
I'm just trying to wake you up about it. I'm trying to wake you up.
You witness me get this correct, rack. What I'm speaking is the God project. Facts into brains of those unaware. Now you're facing the truth in the square. Babies like biting, then yo, you should do this. Your man wants to be, then we can do this. Then when it's time for you to face the God, I'll be giving you the whole yard. That's what's the yard.
I'm just trying to wake you up about it. I'm trying to wake you up.
From the strongest toothpicks, so keep biting to see how the truth takes. You need guidance and some persistence, cause you lack the training to go the distance. But I'll rhyme till the fullest limit, and this is just a fraction of the strength of the genius. Words from a genius.
I'm just trying to wake you up.
The genius. Words from a genius.
Hey, alright, so I got a headline for you here. Pretty neato. Lightning breaks finger off Rio's Christ the Redeemer statue. Thought that was pretty wild stuff. I happen to think that thing is coming down. You even watch that movie 2012, it comes down. So, I mean, that big one, earthquake or whatever hits, that thing is not going to last. And it's not that hard to believe anyway. I mean, if we're really heading into what we think we're all heading into, which is, you know, a satanic takeover, and you got the pentagram on, you know, on the ground in Kazakhstan or whatever, wherever it is over there, and then you got this whole, you know, them wanting to build a 7-foot tall statue of the devil in Oklahoma. I mean, if we're really headed in that direction, which it certainly seems that way, then this thing you figure would have to come down sooner or later anyway. So, and then I wanted to share this with you. Since we've been talking about this, I thought this was rather appropriate. This is from CNN, as you can see, and they're talking about how exorcisms are on the rise, right? For real.
Like filmmaker Lorenzo Raveggi. Someone put a curse on me and things started going very badly. I felt bad both physically and psychologically, he says.
So he's looking for an exorcism, right? He says he got a curse put on him.
Wake you up.
Well, what else do we call a curse? A hex. What's on Saturn? A hexagon. So just thought that was pretty, I think that's neat. And look, and maybe I'm wrong about all this stuff, because I'm having people who don't understand where I'm getting at the cube and Saturn is evil. Maybe I'm wrong about this stuff, you know, but all I can tell you is that from what I've been learning about this stuff, from, you know, occult science and Mr. McCleary and all this kind of what have you, and dreams within dreams and trample on snakes, and I mean, these guys got some really good arguments, but all I can tell you is that from what I'm doing and from learning from this stuff is that,
the question is from a stage magician, and the question is, what is the nature of
philosopher, and I
magic,
believe
or
he studied
what is magic,
plants and stuff like that,
wonder
fungi.
that it invokes. There are two theories. I mean, magic is not a theory at all. There are two theories about how the world works, and each one depends on a fundamental assumption about what the world is. There's the scientific theory, which says the world is tiny packets of matter squealing along through empty space at close to the speed of light, and
I'm just trying to wake you up. I'm trying to wake you up.
Laws. That's what science tells us the world is. Another theory is, and to my mind, a much more appealing and even intuitively correct theory is the world is language. The world is made of language. We can say that the world is composed of little demons doing calisthenics, each one the size of a pissant's eyebrow. Or we can say the world is made out of wave mechanical packets of matter flying along at the speed of light. But notice that what we get each time is words. Our model of what the world is made of words, and the world is composed of description. Now, in the era before science, scientists like to say people were more epistemologically naive. what they mean by that is they didn't have a clear understanding of the division between the inside and the outside, between what we imagine and what actually is. But if you live long enough, I think you discover what we imagine.
I'm just trying to wake you up, everybody. I'm trying to wake you up.
The same thing. Now, whenever you say the world is made of language, the positivists object by saying, well, then why isn't it the way we say it is? I didn't say it's the way we say it is. I said it's made of language. And part of the inspiration for my career is the realization that you could get up in front of audiences and say how the world is.
Hello, everybody.
To a small degree, for a limited time, in a limited space, it shimmers and recasts itself and becomes the thing that we say that it is.
Communication is important. A lot of animals communicate their own way, but the way we communicate is important. A lot of humans think it's all verbal, but I don't know, dude. I've been around you enough where, like, just by eye contact, you know, especially when we play basketball and stuff, we know where to be and what to do without.
I mean, it is true magic.
When did
people
start
run all over
why?
the place
Had to
looking
been one
for
of the most
paranormal abilities. But notice that when I speak, if your internal dictionary matches my internal dictionary, that my thoughts cross the air as an acoustical pressure wave and are reconstructed inside your cerebral cortex as your thought, your understanding of my words. Telepathy exists. It's just that the carrier wave is small mouth noises. All so-called primitive people know that the world is made of language, that you sing it into existence, that what you say it is what it is, that it is maintained in existence by an act of rational apprehension. It's only science which has taken this very weird approach and said, no, the world is somehow independent from the act of description. And this is not a situation where we have two separate points of view, both open-hearted and trying their best to work hard for you. Science carried out its analysis of nature to the point where it shot itself in the foot. Science carried out an analysis of nature that went to such depth that it discovered that nature doesn't exist except as an object of description. That there are no little objects winging their way through empty space. There is only a situation describable by multi-leveled fishy formula, and when you drop a mind into that situation, the fishy formula condenses out into a little particle which can be measured. Mind is necessary for the world to undergo the formality of existing. This is what quantum physics teaches. Unfortunately, this news has not reached the other sciences. This is a real failure on the part of science. You see,
whatever it is,
throughout the 1900s, it was the science everybody envied. It's not unusual in physics for theory and experiment to be congruent to 3 decimal points of accuracy. That just causes scientists to go wild. They love that when theory and measurement fall into congruency like that. And so everyone wanted to be like physics. Chemistry sought that, sociology, psychology, biology. Meanwhile, physics, pursuing the exploration of matter, broke through to a domain where matter ceased to be definable, ceased to even exist in any ordinary way, seemed to behave in incredibly strange ways. Time flows backward. Energy crosses barriers without ever going through them, by tunneling through them in some way. modern biology is still afflicted with physics envy. Meanwhile, physics has gone on to a realm of such exotic and surreal uncertainty that it's at this point to the left of psychology in the precision of its metaphors. So science has undercut itself and now exists in a state of unrecognized crisis that hopefully the psychedelic experience will exacerbate to the point where this will arrive on the plate of every experimentalist and observational and observer.
The secret of secrets. The just announced Nobel Prizes for both chemistry and physics have gone to research related to the carbon atom. The Nobel Prize for Chemistry went to 3 scientists for developing a toolkit to manipulate carbon atoms, while the Physics Prize has gone to 2 Russian-born physicists for their study on the remarkable properties of graphene, an ultra-thin form of carbon. While announcing the Nobel Prize for Physics, the Royal Swedish Academy of Sciences stated,
"Carbon, the basis of all known life on Earth, has surprised us once again."
They do not realize how loaded their statement is. For what we have seen in graphene is only a small glimpse of the wonders that carbon is capable of, especially what awaits us in the very near future. Before we reveal the form of carbon that is going to change every aspect of our lives, so completely and so drastically, let us bring to your attention a few other related occurrences that have been making the news in the past weeks. Recently there was a flurry of concern in the scientific circles regarding the discovery of the sun's influence on the decay of radioactive elements on Earth. It was found that some kind of strange emissions from the sun are causing matter to mutate on Earth. Its influence on the decay rates of elements like carbon-14 has been especially worrisome and unexpected. Carbon, as previously stated, is the basic building block of life, as we know it, and carbon-12 is the most abundant form of carbon, accounting for about 99% of all known forms of carbon. It is the isotope of carbon that consists of 6 protons, 6 electrons and 6 neutrons. 6, 6, 6. Does that sound familiar? After oxygen, the second most abundant element in the human body is carbon-12. On cremation, the body returns to its carbon-12 state. After hydrogen, helium and oxygen, which are all gases, carbon-12 is the most abundant element in the universe. Carbon-12 is also one of the 5 elements that make up the human DNA. Thus carbon-12 is indeed the most crucial element as far as life as we know today is concerned. This is probably what the writer of the Revelation meant when he said that 666 was the number of man, or number of the beast. It is the number of carbon-12, which is the basis of man's physical body, which ties him to the physical universe. This is especially significant when we understand what transmutation awaits this carbon-12, which will bestow man such superhuman powers that will make every technological advancement.
Food safety standards in China are terrible. In the supermarket, I always go to the imported food section. When my child was very young, we used to order milk powder and even nappies from Japan over the internet. At that time, a can of milk powder was more than 30 euros.
China's birth rate is now below 1.5 children per woman. That's one of the lowest in the world. Many experts like Zhuo Shuijing say the one-child policy is now irrelevant.
Over the long term, the birth rate in China will be very low. Other Chinese communities like in Taiwan, Hong Kong, Macau have the lowest birth rates in the world. And over there, they don't even have any birth control policies. The percentage of senior citizens in China will keep increasing in the future, which will impact the sustainable